doll that grows older every night. The first night, it started with an innocent gift. My niece Emma had always loved dolls, so when I found an antique porcelain doll at a thrift shop, I thought it would be the perfect present for her 7th birthday. The doll was beautiful, hand-painted with delicate features, pale rosy cheeks, and golden ringlets of hair. Her eyes were a piercing shade of blue, almost too lifelike. She wore a Victorian-style dress, lace-trimmed and slightly faded from time. The old woman at the counter smiled when she saw me buy it. "That one's special," she said. I laughed. "Special how?" Her expression flickered just for a second. "Just unique. She's been around for a long time. I should have known better, but at the time it was just a doll, or so I thought." The change, Emma adored it immediately. She named her Annabelle, not after the famous haunted doll, just because she liked the name. That first night, she tucked Annabelle into bed beside her, hugging her like a teddy bear. But the next morning, something was off. The doll looked different. Her hair, once curled perfectly, seemed a little looser. The golden locks had dimmed, slightly darker than before. Her porcelain skin had a faint discoloration, a smudge on her cheek that I was sure wasn't there yesterday. "Did you play with her outside?" I asked Emma. She shook her head. "No, she stayed right here with me." It was weird, but I shrugged it off. Maybe I just hadn't looked at it closely before. By the next night, I'd realize how wrong I was. The second night. The second morning, the change was impossible to ignore. Annabelle's face had altered. The soft, childish roundness of her features was fading. Her cheekbones looked sharper, her nose slightly more defined. Her golden curls had lost their luster, darkening even further. She looked older. "Emma," I asked carefully, "did you do something to Annabelle?" Emma frowned. "No, Auntie, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" The little girl bit her lip. "Last night I woke up and I thought I heard her breathing. A chill crept up my spine. I forced a laugh. Dolls don't breathe, sweetheart. Maybe it was just the wind." Emma nodded slowly, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Neither was I. The third night I couldn't sleep. Something about that doll gnawed at my nerves. So at 3 a.m., I crept into Emma's room. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting long shadows. Emma was fast asleep, curled under her blankets. Annabelle lay beside her, perfectly still. I bent down, heart pounding, and looked closer. My breath caught in my throat. She had changed again. Annabelle's face was now that of a young woman, maybe 16 or 17. Her once rosy cheeks had paled. Her lips were fuller. Her eyes, they weren't glassy anymore. They looked wet, like human eyes. My stomach churned. I grabbed the doll and rushed out of the room, nearly tripping over my own feet. The attempt to get rid of it, I was done. I didn't care if Emma cried. I wasn't keeping that thing in the house. At dawn, I drove to the nearest dumpster and tossed the doll in. I even watched as the garbage truck came and crushed it beneath tons of trash. It was gone. Or so I thought. That night, Emma screamed. I ran to her room, heart pounding. She was sitting upright in bed, tears streaming down her face. "She's back," she sobbed. "Annabelle's back." I turned. And there she was, sitting right on the bed, smiling. But she wasn't a doll anymore. She was a woman now. Her skin was no longer porcelain, it was flesh. Her hair, once synthetic, now looked like real strands of human hair. She blinked. I grabbed Emma and ran. The truth, I called a priest. He listened carefully, his face growing pale. "You should never have brought that doll into your home," he said grimly. I swallowed. "What is she?" he sighed. "A spirit, a soul trapped inside the doll, but only for a time." My blood ran cold. "What happens when she fully ages?" I whispered. The priest's expression darkened. "She takes a new body, to live again." I stared at Emma. The priest nodded. She was waiting for a child. The final night. I didn't sleep. I sat in Emma's room watching Annabelle, who now looked like a woman in her mid-20s. She didn't move, didn't speak, but she watched, waiting. At 3 a.m., Emma whimpered in her sleep. Annabelle's lips curled into a smile. I had to do something, fast. I grabbed the doll and ran outside, heart hammering. I had read once that spirits bind to objects, that if you destroy the object, the spirit dies with it. I doused Annabelle in gasoline. She blinked. Her lips moved. "You can't get rid of me," she whispered. I lit the match and dropped it. Flames erupted, engulfing her. For a second, I thought I heard screaming, a shrill, inhuman wail. The flames flickered wildly, casting shadows that danced like twisted figures. Then, silence. And she was gone. The aftermath. Emma never spoke of Annabelle again. She seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. But sometimes late at night I still hear it. A whisper. You can't get rid of me. And in the darkness, I swear, I see something watching and waiting. The face staring at me from the dark corner. The first night I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I enjoyed horror movies and creepy stories, but that's all they were. Stories. Made-up tales designed to spook people. But then, something changed. It started when I moved into my new apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small one-bedroom unit in an old building downtown. Cheap rent, decent location. The only weird thing? There was a dark corner in my bedroom. The way the room was designed, the light from the ceiling fixture never quite reached that one spot. Even with lamps on, it stayed oddly shadowed, as if the darkness was thicker there. I didn't think much of it. Not until the first night. The eyes in the dark, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I felt it. A sensation. Like I was being watched. I looked up toward the corner, and that's when I saw them. Two eyes. Wide, gleaming, unblinking. Staring at me from the dark. My heart slammed against my ribs. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. I sat up, gasping, my body slick with sweat. It's just my imagination, I told myself. Just a trick of the light. I didn't sleep much that night, the second night. The next morning, I forced myself to laugh it off. Maybe I was just overtired. Maybe the shadows played tricks on my mind. But when night fell and I turned off the lights, they came back. The eyes, staring. This time, I felt something else too. A presence, like something was there, standing in the corner, watching. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The second the light hit the corner, nothing, just an empty space. But when I turned the light off, the eyes were back, closer. I left the bedroom and slept on the couch that night. The whisper. By the third night, I was exhausted. I hadn't gotten more than a few hours of sleep. I was starting to feel off, like something in the apartment was draining me. That night I made a mistake. I spoke to it. I don't know why. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't real. Who are you? I whispered silence. Then, a voice, faint, raspy. Let me in. I froze. The voice had come from the corner. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it toward the dark. Again, nothing. But this time, even when I turned the light back off, the eyes were gone. The shadow that moved. I thought maybe I had scared it away. I was wrong. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound, a soft, scraping noise, like something was moving. I turned over, and my stomach dropped. The shadow in the corner, it was closer. No longer just an empty patch of darkness. It had form, a hunched, shifting figure, and it was crawling toward me. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking. The second I turned on the flashlight, it was gone. The room was silent, still, but I knew what I saw. I wasn't alone. The final night, I had to leave. I didn't care about breaking my lease. I didn't care about losing my deposit. I just needed to get out. I started packing that morning, but something strange happened. When I left my apartment to grab some boxes, I ran into my neighbor, an old woman who had lived in the building for years. She saw my suitcase and frowned. "Leaving already?" she asked. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Just not a good fit." She nodded, as if she understood. Then she looked toward my door. "Is it the corner?" she asked. I felt ice crawl down my spine. She sighed. "The last tenant left in a hurry, too. Before that, a woman lived there for years. She always talked about a shadow, about eyes watching her at night." I swallowed hard. "What happened to her?" The old woman hesitated. "She started changing." My mouth went dry. "Changing how?" "She stopped sleeping," she said. "Stopped eating. Started talking to someone that wasn't there. She said it wanted to come closer, that it wanted to become her." A chill ran through me. "Where is she now?" I whispered. The woman looked away. She disappeared. The escape, I didn't ask anything else. I didn't want to know. I just grabbed my things and left. I didn't even stay for the final walkthrough. I just threw my keys at the landlord and got the hell out of there. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That night, in my new apartment, I slept soundly. No shadows, no whispers, no eyes watching me from the dark. But sometimes, just sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I feel like I'm not alone. and in the darkest corner of my room, I swear, I see something staring back. The mysterious footsteps in my attic, moving into the house. I've always loved old houses. There's something about their history, their character, the way the wood creaks underfoot, the stories held within their walls. So when I found a century-old Victorian house for rent at an unbelievably low price, I didn't hesitate. "Why is it so cheap?" I asked the landlord. He hesitated. "People say it's a little noisy," he admitted, "but nothing dangerous. Just old house sounds." I shrugged. "I can handle some creaking floors." Oh, how wrong I was. The first night, that first evening, I settled in with a glass of wine and a book. The house was quiet, except for the usual settling sounds, wood groaning, pipes clicking. Then, around midnight, I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, above me, in the attic. I froze. I was the only one in the house. The attic was empty. At least it was supposed to be. I told myself it was nothing, just the house shifting. I forced myself to sleep. But the next night, it happened again. The second night, the sound of someone walking. This time I was awake when I heard them. Slow, heavy, footsteps, pacing, not random creaks, steps, as if someone was walking back and forth in my attic. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. With shaky hands, I climbed up to the attic door. I hesitated. Then, taking a deep breath, I pushed it open. The attic was empty, nothing but dust and old wooden beams. I exhaled a laugh, shaking my head. Just my imagination. Then I noticed something. The dust on the attic floor. It should have been undisturbed, but there, clear as day, were footprints. The third night, the voice. By the third night, I was scared. I locked my bedroom door, told myself I'd ignore it. But then, a voice. Low. Whispering. Coming from the attic. "Come upstairs." I stopped breathing. The voice was right above me. "Come upstairs." I yanked the blankets over my head, heart hammering. I refused to move. Refused to listen. I don't know when I fell asleep, but when I woke up, my attic door was open. The final night. The thing in the attic. I should have left, but I needed proof. So on the fourth night, I set up my phone on a chair, pointed at the attic door. I hit record and went to bed. Again, around midnight, the footsteps started. But this time there was something different. A dragging sound, like something was pulling itself across the floor. Then, the voice. "Let me in." I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't sleep. When morning finally came, I grabbed my phone and played the video. At first, it was just darkness, silence. Then, at 3:14 a.m., the attic door opened. Not by itself, by something. A shadowy figure, too tall, too thin, crawled down the attic steps. And right before the video ended, it did something that made my blood turn to ice. It turned to the camera, and it smiled. I left that house that day. I packed my bags and got the hell out. I never told the landlord why, never asked what happened in that attic. I just knew I couldn't stay. But sometimes, late at night, in my new apartment, I still hear footsteps. And I wonder, did I leave it behind? Or did it follow me?